Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading from the One Year Bible. My name's Stephen Mizell. Jay Rivenbark and I are joined by Alyssa Bream, and today we're looking at a passage from 1 Peter chapter 4 and 5. And there are some questions that we are going to examine about what it means for the end to be near, what it means to care for the flock of God, and how we can keep humility in our leadership. So I hope you grab your Bible and a pen and paper, and let's study the Word of God together. Hey everyone, we're in today's reading, the New Testament portion, the finishing up of 1 Peter. And, he's talking about living faithful in the end times. And he closes his letter with this urgency. Time is short, suffering is real, leadership must be humble. And it's not a countdown to destruction. It's a call to devotion. That's what I would say. And in these two chapters, 4 and 5 here, were there any things you said, I want to make sure we talk about this today?
Just his emphasis of being reminded that time and life is short, and to do the right thing, not only in our relationship with God, but to other people. And he talks about those things require discipline and effort and intentionality, but being committed to God and to other people.
My favorite verse was verse 15, and it just struck me that if you suffer, however, it must not be for murder, stealing, making trouble, or prying into other people's affairs. Peter's like, don't be stupid and call it. They say you're suffering for Christ.
You brought it on yourself.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain things that are like, I'm so persecuted for this. It's like, no, you made some stupid decisions. You can deal with it.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about that is 3 of those. So in the translation here, it says, if you suffer, it should not be as a murderer, or thief, or any other kind of criminal, or even as a meddler. I think the New Living Translation, how does it say it?
Prying into other people's
business. 3 of those are pretty obvious. One of those is not. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in general, in the church, we're pretty consistent. Don't steal, don't kill, don't commit any kind of criminal behavior. But man, we like to stick our nose in other people's business. And he includes that with those other 3. Not too long ago in a daily reading, a proverb said something about when you stick your nose in somebody else's argument, like grabbing a dog by the ears.
Yeah.
Why are we tempted to get in other people's business? And why do we not see how serious that is? Because here it seems to me for him to put it with murder and thievery and any other criminal activity.
Yeah. He attaches it to suffering, meaning there's problems, there's trouble comes with it.
Right.
Period.
Why are we so prone to get in other people's business?
I don't know. Like, that's like, oh goodness. Like, the fun thing about TikTok is like seeing people's messy things, are like telling stories about this. And like, I think it's almost just, we like that story. We're intrigued by it, and we're maybe so happy it's not us in that mess. I don't know. I think it's really human nature just to really like people's stories and
get in their business.
Yeah.
And there are people that just love drama, that just like being a part of it, feed off of it, want to wallow up in it, or enjoy watching other people's drama. Like you said, and it seems that some people are more wired that way than others. But I would agree, it's part of nature for so many people.
When I think of getting in other people's business, it is offering my unwanted opinion is what I think about sometimes. I am not bad for stepping into your life and saying, I don't like what you do, The place that I have had to work the hardest, though, is with my kids. and my intentions are good. So that's what I want to say about that. If I have ever inserted myself into their business, my intentions were good. It was never to make it worse. I never stepped in trying to make it worse. I have made it worse, mostly by inserting myself. And the moment that I did, their response was, well, if that's what you want me to do, I'm going to do exactly the opposite. Now, they didn't say it that way. They just did it. That's just what they did. And so I made it worse without intentionally making it worse. And I think that is the danger I have learned. And I think I'm much better at it today, that if they don't ask, I don't.
Leave it alone.
I don't share it. Like, it's okay. You're going to figure it out. Like, if you want my opinion, you're going to come ask me for it, but I'm not going to stick my nose in it, because for whatever reason, in my job, people feel like they have, it's their responsibility to stick their nose in, the way I do it, or even my family, you should do X or whatever. And, sometimes I think it's well-meaning, but most of the time it ticks me off because I didn't ask. And if I wanted your opinion, I would have asked you, I really would have. And I think it causes more problems. And I don't think we realize that. I don't think we realize the struggle that it or the strain it puts on relationships. So he talks about, he says, the end of the world is coming soon, therefore be earnest and disciplined in your prayers. This whole concept of the end of the world, or the end is near, or in verse 7 of chapter 4, that's how he begins out. The end of all things is near, therefore be alert and sober of mind, is what the NIV says. The NLT says the end of the world is coming soon. What does the end of the world mean, or the end is near, mean for Christian priorities?
He gives 3 that I think are just like spot on right there. Talks about earnest and disciplined prayers, showing deep love, and hospitality. And I think that those are the things that, as whatever end is drawing near, you need to focus on. And it's that not waiting for tomorrow to do something that you can do today. Like, I don't know, whenever I have a big project at work, some video I'm editing or thing, I need that deadline sometimes to be able to like get that focus to like I will work on something like ahead of time, and then it never fails that like the day before I'm able to sit down and like, I wish I could have done
all
this.
The clarity in the world.
Yes, all the clarity in the world. And so I think that if we think of the end is near, it should give us that clarity and that focus and that extra push to be hospitable to somebody that we wouldn't normally, or to show love in a situation that it's really tough, and to remember to pray and to be disciplined in that. And hopefully it's that extra push we need to be focused.
The end is coming for all of us, whether it's Jesus' return, whether it is our last day on earth. I think the focus ultimately is there's a limited time here and what we're going to do, which is why he circles back to these things about being earnest, being disciplined. You've got a limited opportunity to get these things done and influence people. So focus.
Yeah, I think deadlines bring clarity. I jokingly say I get more done the last 3 days before I leave on a vacation than pretty much any other time in my life. But recently I shared with the church some things that I wanted to see happen in my last season here as pastor. But I think that clarity only comes because I know there's an end coming, right? I know there's an expiration to it. And I think the wrestling match, because I think this is the piece that often when I hear people talk about the end, they're creating some kind of panic or fear in people, right? Get right or get left kind of thing. That's often the way it's approached. I don't think that's the way he approaches it here, and I think that for me, some of the clarity that I was able to get is to understand that it's about purpose, not panic. That there it has to be stronger than that, because I thought the questions I had been asking were all wrong. Right? The questions I was asking myself about the last season is, do I build this building or do I raise the money for somebody to build the building? Neither were important, right? Because they're not purposeful. The purpose is eternal, right? Are people going to get saved? Or there are going to be pastors to be able to pastor them? The buildings will take care of themselves if those other things are raised up and done. And I was asking the wrong question. And once I got the clarity around it, and I think that's when I read some of these things about the end times, and this is not the way I've always seen it, I think he's trying to tell them you need to live with purpose, right? You don't need to live in fear. You don't need to live afraid. You need to make sure, because you understand that the end is near, and the end is near for us, that you should be praying, right? You should be doing those things that are critically important. Living a disciplined life, all of those things are critically important as you approach the end, and making sure you set the example that you need to set. As he moves on into chapter 5, he says, in chapter 5, he says, care for the flock that God has entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly. The verse before it, he talks about Christ's sufferings, right? So I think we all know that serving in ministry is not the most glorious job. And there are moments where you have to you walk on the stage and you have to suck it up and lead the people, even when you're suffering. I'll give you an example in a few minutes of time in my life where I felt like that was so, I wasn't prepared. But how can leaders model humility even in hardship? How do they do that?
He talks about things like not lording over them, and of course he talks about attitude, really motivation from the heart, not to do it grudgingly, but to do it willingly. I think the trap is set when it's about us and what's in it for us rather than whom we are serving. And this is part of the reminder, as you said, sometimes it is difficult, challenging, can be downright hard perhaps, but that ultimately we should be doing this for the kingdom and not for our own selves. And in order to do that, there has to be humility. We talked another time about humility when you're, quote, successful or around influential and powerful people. It also takes humility to continue to serve when things aren't going well, when you aren't around influential people and things aren't prosperous. Humility still has to be a part of that equation.
Standing firm in grace and love when it's hard is an act of following God, and it can't be done by our human emotions, because when it's hard, when you've been hurt, when people are hurting each other and you're having to stand there, I think that is one of the greatest acts of humility you can do, is to give that love and that grace. I think it was quoted in here because I wrote it down. Proverbs 3:34, that God gives grace to the humble. But I think that you could flip that, and it's true that the humble give grace, and when it's undeserved.
They say that the most dangerous animal is a hurt animal, injured, wounded. And I think as pastors, as shepherds, the time that we have to be the most careful is when we're wounded, because we tend to lash out we tend, the old saying, hurt people, can be true, and I have over my lifetime seen different preachers go to the pulpit wounded and just wound everybody in earshot, just, rip into them. And I think removed from it after a moment of healing, they would regret it. They may have even regretted it at that moment. Right. But it is hard. It is hard to walk up and shepherd, so I have a dog, and I love my dog. It's the best dog in the world. He's so easy. But I never had a dog. I never had a pet. I swore I'd never have a dog in the house. So all of those things went out the window. But part of the reason was when I was probably 8, 9 years old, me and some boys were over throwing some rocks at what we thought was an empty doghouse, and it won't. And this big old dog come out. And I was the slowest one of the bunch, and the dog bit me. Ended up going to the hospital, having to have a shot. And that marked me.
Sure.
I'm 58 now, but I didn't process that, for the longest time. But I got bit, so I just didn't want a dog. I don't want all dogs are bad. I was scared of all dogs. Now I'm not scared of dogs at all. There probably are some that I should be scared of, but I don't think about it that way. But I think that when we've been bitten, hurt, wounded, damaged, we're scared. We think everybody's that way. I think that it's true. And, there's a term in church culture called church hurt now, and this is, it's easy to say. It is real. I think all of us have experienced it to some level. Every one of us have been hurt. We have been wounded, and we have wounded in church. All of us have. But our response to that often dictates whether we go back to church, whether we trust a leader, whether we, or how well we lead. When, there are pastors who think all deacons are bad, or all elders are bad, or all church leaders are bad, or all, whatever are bad because they have had a bad experience. And I think we have to just practice modeling humility. Leadership is really about stewardship, not status. How are we managing? How are we overseeing the people that God has given into our care? And we should get better at it and become more aware of it, not less aware of it. There's nothing more frustrating than somebody who is stuck on their status. Right? I was recently having a conversation, and the conversation was about somebody else, and they were trying to express to me this other person's frustration, and they said, "These people have to understand I'm the leader." If you're in that spot, you're in a bad spot, and either you're being wounded or you're getting ready to wound somebody or have wounded somebody. It's a really dangerous place to be. Thank you for joining us again today on this edition of One Single Story. Peter reminds us that the end of all things is not fear, it's focus. It's time to live on purpose. And so we can stay humble, we can stay watchful, and we can keep our eyes on the chief shepherd, Jesus Christ, and he will guide us. Hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.